Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Visual God. Really appreciate you listening. If this is the first time you've listened, then I really want to welcome you and say it means a lot to me. There's so many different types of ministries, teachings, Facebook clips, Instagram stories, you name it. And this is both like the most amazing time and the most crowded time to try and put something out there. So I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you spend some time listening to what I've got to share. But I want to move on and just share a couple of things that are really inputted into my life. Tom Alsop, our lead pastor at Catchfire London, laughs whenever I mention this, but I often start sentences with, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and then I go and throw some one-liner at him or something that somebody very clever and anointed has come up with. I just wanted to share some podcasts that I've been listening to over the last few years. Some of them are a little bit more recent. Some of them are much more... I've been a longer-term listener, and I just want to share these by way of saying, hey, look, go check these guys out. There's a lot of different ministries, and one of the things God has put a hunger in me is a hunger for variety. And so if you were to look down my podcast subscriptions, you would see quite a bizarre mix of stuff, and I'm going to give you a bit of a bizarre mix of stuff here. But these are all ministry podcasts in one way or another that will get you thinking, will stretch you, will feed the areas that you want fed, and will stir the areas that you didn't even know that you had in you. And so I'm going to put some visuals up on the video of this, which I don't usually do, but I'm going to give you some screenshots of what the podcasts look like. But I just want to dive in. I've got one that's on apologetics, one that's on intimacy with Jesus, one that's on ministry leadership, one that's on psychology and Christian therapy, one that's on leadership growth, and one that's just a conversation between a husband and a wife. So I'm going to try and get through as many as I can on this one, and I might do a part 2 as well. But I hope these will be interesting and useful for you. You can go find them out and see what you think. So the first one I want to talk about is it's actually a dual podcast by Ravi Zacharias, the Christian apologist, and he does one called Let My People Think and another one called Just Thinking. Now, even by the titles, you can probably work out where he's going. His tagline for his ministry is helping the believer think and the thinker believe, which I love. And his ministry is to go around university campuses and lecture halls all over the world and be an apologist, argue for Christ, and be questioned about anything to do with the Christian faith. And he is phenomenally educated, and his team of apologists go all around the world and do this. And what I love about his ministry is he's a philosopher, a theologian, and an apologist, and there's just an extremely high level of thought put in, which just blows my mind. It's very different to the type of sort of charismatic preach that I would be used to, that I get in, week out. But such an exceptional mind. Him and his team will spend time in their base in Atlanta talking through, how do we answer these questions? How do we answer LGBTQ? How do we answer the problem of evil and suffering? How do we talk about other religions? How do we talk about materialism? How do we talk about different philosophies and worldviews, and a lot of things that perhaps if you're in a charismatic mold, we may not have a lot of these debates publicly. These guys go head first into them, and I would, if you want your brain massaged and you want to learn some big words, but by someone who knows the love of God, and someone whose story actually started age 18 with a suicide attempt and then meeting Jesus in a hospital bed, you'll get both heart and head with Ravi Zacharias, and I think he is just incredible. I have so much respect for him, and I love getting stretched by his ministry. So that's one. Jump over to the other end of the aisle, Seeing Jesus, the podcast with Michael Koulianos. If you know Michael Koulianos, he is married to Benny Hinn's daughter. He has a wonderful ministry, Jesus Image, and I got utterly busted in October watching an interview that he did with Bill Johnson, Benny Hinn, and Lou Engle. I mean, what a panel. You can find it on YouTube. And this man just is obsessed with intimacy with Jesus. His entire ministry is built very simply and purely around the person of Jesus. And so when you listen to the podcast, I mean, you just feel the intensity of Jesus in the room. It's just phenomenal. And some of the talks that I've listened to, they just birth a hunger for intimacy. You just want to get down on your knees. And one of the things that I really appreciate, and I love this in anyone I hear who just goes vulnerable and real, is that he both has a kind of intimacy with Jesus that I'm so envious of, in a godly way, but also a reality of like, do you know what? I was praying with Kenneth Copeland, and after 3 minutes, I just really had prayed all I could think of praying for. And I'm like, I just need to hear someone say that. I need to hear somebody say, I just run out of things to pray for sometime. And he both has this beautiful hunger for Jesus, and also this just reality of to be able to stand up in front of his church and say, yeah, me and my wife were struggling to get on the same page, and she just turned to me and said, you just got to go spend some more time with Jesus right now because you are not in a good place. I don't know about you, I need to hear leaders in the body of Christ say things like that. It removes the mask, the pedestal that we place them on, and it makes it possible for us to step into the kind of faith that they have, rather than being intimidated or sort of feel like it's beyond us. So Seeing Jesus with Michael Koulianos, you should check that podcast out for sure. Jumping onto a slightly different one now, the Allender Center podcast. Now, I first came across Dr. Dan Allender when I watched the Heart of Man film. If you haven't seen it, it is a tough watch and a powerful watch. If you could put the song Reckless Love into a movie and make a movie out of the lyrics of that song, you would have the Heart of Man. And he was just a commentator, one of the talking heads in the documentary. And I just felt like, oh man, you're both talking with a lot of wisdom, a lot of vulnerability, and also you just really seem to know the Father. And so I kind of did a bit of Google searching, found this guy. Turns out he has his own center of sort of Christian therapy and counseling, but he's also a teacher in the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. So that intrigued me because I'm not really listening to anybody who's coming at the kingdom from that angle. And his podcasts, they're so raw. I mean, they really are raw. He's so open. He interviews a lot of people, a lot of therapists, a lot of authors, everything from dealing with difficult people to trauma and shame and violence in relationships and emotions, to triangulation, to wisdom literature. And there's something I just find so listenable about him. He's so honest, but also he just seems to carry so much joy. And I've found Abby, my wife, and I have listened to a lot of their stuff, and have always just found the angle so refreshing. It's such a different angle that he comes at. Yeah, I really would check out the Allender Center, because I think there's a lot of topics that are just not things I would be familiar with approaching myself. Trauma and memory in the tale, sexual brokenness and healing, 5-part series on intriguing scriptures, the epidemic of loneliness, a theology of abuse. Like these are all just topics of titles that his podcast is on. But I think the guy is brilliant, and I love hearing his teaching. I'm going to come in with one more, and then I think I'm going to do a part 2 about this. Completely other end of the scale. I'm jumping across now, moving away from psychology and therapy to organizational leadership. and this is the one I'll end this podcast on. Craig Groeschel's leadership podcast. That man is a gift to the kingdom of God. If you know the YouVersion Bible app that you may have on your phone, his church birthed that a long time ago. When Apple first released the App Store, the YouVersion Bible app was one of the first 100 apps, free apps that was put on, and that came out of local church, Life.Church, that Craig Groeschel runs, and he does these 20-minute leadership podcasts that are aimed at anybody who's in organizational leadership. It's not just a pastor or anything like that. It helps if you're in Christian ministry because you can probably join the dots together for your own role. But this is business leadership, family leadership, church leadership, marketplace leadership. I don't know quite how he does it. I've listened to so many of them, and somehow he is able in 20 minutes to both give you like the most refined points of leadership encouragement and challenge, and review them and give you points for application. It's almost like being given the finest cut of meat that is just perfectly cooked, perfectly tenderized, and it's just so filling. His leadership podcasts are phenomenal, and I've included a lot of them in my own personal leadership journey, in my leadership in church. Here are some titles: 4 Keys to Spot the Talent Others Miss, How to Recognize Leaders with High Potential, Becoming the Centered Leader Your Team Craves, How to Inspire Your Team, 4 Essentials of Innovation, How Effective Leaders Handle Criticism, Giving and Receiving Feedback. There's so many different things, and for 20 minutes, it's just pure gold. And so check out him. So the ones that I talked about were Ravi Zacharias, the Justin King podcast, Seeing Jesus with Michael Koulianis, the Allender Center podcast, and the Craig Groeschel Leadership podcast. Check them out. See what you think. I think they'll bless you. Let me know any great podcasts you're listening to. I'm going to do a part 2 of this later. But bless you to learn and receive. And as Ravi Zacharias says, that the believer would be able to learn how to think, and the thinker would learn how to believe. And I bless you all to walk in that this week.